Jimmy Fallon stood to agitate hands. Denzel Washington accomplished into his anorak abridged instead. And what he pulled out silenced the absolute studio. It was a Tuesday night taping. February 2018, The Tonight Show. Routine celebrity interview. Denzel was announcement a new film, standard stuff. The affectionate of articulation Jimmy had done 1,000 times. The admirers acclaimed as Denzel absolved assimilate the stage. Jimmy stood abaft his desk, animated wide, Duke already extending for the acceptable greeting. The bandage played, the cameras rolled, aggregate normal. Denzel accomplished the desk, looked at Jimmy's ample hand, and befuddled his arch no. The smile froze on Jimmy's face. His Duke afraid in the air, awkward, uncertain. The admirers chock-full clapping. The bandage kept arena for 2 added beats afore abaft off into abashed silence. Denzel. Jimmy's articulation agitated 18-karat confusion. You okay, man? Denzel didn't answer. Instead, he accomplished into the central abridged of his clothing jacket. Slowly, deliberately, his eyes never abrogation Jimmy's face. The flat captivated its breath. What Denzel pulled out was small. A photograph. Old edges worn. The affectionate of photo that's been agitated about for years. He captivated it up amid them. A budding abundant for Jimmy to see. Not a budding abundant for the cameras to bolt clearly. Jimmy's face changed. The abashing vanished, replaced by article else. Recognition, a fresh shock, a fresh article that looked like fear. Where did you get that? Jimmy's articulation was about audible. From the actuality who asked me to accord it to you, Denzel said quietly. Tonight on animate television, because they knew this was the abandoned way you'd see it. The admirers was absolutely silent. 300 bodies aptitude advanced aggravating to accept what they were witnessing. The roots exchanged glances. Quest's drumsticks were Arctic midair. Jimmy took the photograph with abashed hands. He stared at it for 5 abnormal, that acquainted like minutes. Aback he looked up, his eyes were glistening. Is she here? Jimmy asked, his articulation cracking. Denzel nodded against the audience. Row 12, larboard side. Every camera in the flat swung against that section. The lights followed, and there, sitting in the 12th row, was an aged atramentous woman, mid-70s, cutting a Abbey dress. Easily bankrupt in her lap, tears animate bottomward her face. Jimmy's Duke went to his mouth. Miss Patterson? The woman nodded, clumsy to speak. What Jimmy didn't apperceive was that the woman in row 12 had spent 6 months aggravating to ability him through every official channel, and all of them had failed. Evelyn Patterson, retired elementary academy abecedary from Socrates, New York. She'd beatific emails to NBC, belletrist to The Tonight Show, letters through amusing media, all unanswered. Not because anyone was cruel, but because a celebrity gets 10,000 letters a day, and best never ability their target. She'd about accustomed up until 3 weeks ago aback her grandson had an idea. Grandma, he'd said, you apperceive who's a company with Jimmy Fallon? Denzel Washington. They did a scene together. I saw them talking about it. Evelyn had laughed. Baby, I can't aloof alarm up Denzel Washington. But her grandson was persistent. He'd begin out through a acquaintance of accessory that Denzel's abettor sometimes arrested a specific email abode for alms work. It was a continued shot, a antic continued shot. Evelyn wrote the email anyway, explained who she was, what Jimmy Fallon meant to her, why she bare to see him, why it had to be public, why it had to be now. She absorbed the photograph. The one Denzel was now captivation on civic television. The email sat in an inbox for 9 days. A fresh Denzel's abetta showed it to him. Denzel apprehended again, alleged Evelyn directly. I'll advise you, he'd said. But you charge to accept this as activity to be big. Everyone's activity to see this. That's the point, Evelyn had replied. He needs to see it, and he needs to apperceive bodies are watching. Denzel had gotten her admission to tonight's taping. Front section, row 12. He'd agitated the photograph in his anorak abridged all day. And aback he absolved assimilate that stage. He knew absolutely what he was activity to do. Refuse the handshake. Actualize the moment. Accomplish abiding America was watching. Because what Evelyn Patterson bare to acquaint Jimmy Fallon wasn't a clandestine conversation. It was accessible acknowledge you for article that happened 31 years ago. Carson chock-full mid-joke. The absolute flat froze. Jimmy was walking against row 12. Not running, walking boring like he was in a dream. The admirers beggared naturally. Bodies aptitude aback in their seats to actualize a path. He accomplished Evelyn's row. She stood capricious on her feet. Jimmy climbed over two bodies to ability her, aside apologies, not caring about cameras or agreement or annihilation, except accepting to this woman. Aback he accomplished her, he didn't apperceive what to say. Aloof stood there, the photograph still in his hand, staring at her. "Hi, Jimmy," Evelyn said, her articulation bendable but bright in the bashful studio. "Miss Patterson," Jimmy breathed. "I can't believe. How did you?" "I bear to acquisition you," she said simply. "I bear to say acknowledge you. And I bear the apple to apprehend it." Jimmy looked bottomward at the photograph again. The angel showed a abundant adolescent Evelyn, maybe 40 years old, continuing with a angular boyish boy al fresco a babyish theater. The boy was animated at the camera, one arm about Evelyn's shoulders. The boy was Jimmy, age 15. "You kept this?" Jimmy's articulation broke. "I've kept it in my wallet for 31 years, Evelyn said. "Every distinct day, because that was the day you adored my son's life." The admirers gasped, actually gasped. Aggregate assimilation of animation from 300 people. Jimmy befuddled his head. "Absence Patterson, I didn't save anyone. We were aloof kids. We were aloof you begin him." Evelyn interrupted, her articulation stronger now. "Aback anybody abroad absolved past. Aback anybody abroad abandoned. Him. Aback I was analytic for 3 hours in a panic. You begin my Marcus and you backward with him until the ambulance came." The adventure was arising now. 31 years old. 1987, Socrates, New York. Jimmy Fallon was 15 years old accomplishing ABCDarian ball at a bounded theater. Not famous, not on TV, aloof a kid with dreams of authoritative bodies laugh. After appearance one Friday night, Jimmy had been walking to his car in the amphitheater parking lot. Aback he'd heard something. A sound, quiet, like addition aggravating to breathe, but struggling. He began an adolescent man, maybe 19 years old, burst abaft a dumpster. Diabetic shock. The kid had been walking home from work, acquainted his claret amoroso drop, approved to accomplish it to a store, but burst in the parking lot instead. Bodies had absolved accomplished him. Dozens of bodies abrogation the theater, but it was dark. He was abaft a dumpster. Accessible to miss, accessible to ignore. Jimmy hadn't abandoned it. He'd run to the kid, arrested if he was breathing, screamed for help. Aback no one came. He'd run aback into the theater, and alleged 911 himself. Afresh he'd sat with the benumbed teenager, captivation his hand, talking to him until the paramedics arrived. The jailbait was Marcus Patterson, Evelyn's abandoned son. The paramedics said if Marcus had been abandoned for addition 10 minutes, he ability not accept fabricated it. His claret amoroso had alone alarmingly low. Brain accident territory. Death territory. Jimmy had adored his life. Afresh abolished into the night afore Evelyn could acknowledge him properly. She approved to acquisition him. Alleged the theater. They said some kid who does ball sometimes. No aftermost name, no acquaintance information. This was 1987, no internet, no amusing media, aloof a drifter who'd adored her son and vanished. She'd had one photo. A amphitheater agent had airtight at the ceremony before. Evelyn had appeared to watch one of Jimmy's ABCDarian ball shows, because Marcus had told her there was this funny kid performing. The agent gave her a copy. It showed her with the angular boyish actor al fresco the theater. She didn't apperceive his aftermost name was Fallon. Didn't apperceive he'd go on to Saturday Night Live. Didn't apperceive he'd become one of the best acclaimed bodies on television, until 5 years ago aback she was watching the Tonight appearance, and saw the host's face, and about alone her coffee cup. "That's him," she'd aside to Marcus, who was visiting with his own children. "That's the boy who adored you." Backstage, an ambassador was aimlessly gesturing to cut to commercial, but Jimmy didn't alike notice. Jimmy was errant now, not ambuscaded. Aloof continuing in the average of row 12, errant while Evelyn captivated both his hands. "I never knew your name," Jimmy said through tears. "I approved to appointment the hospital the abutting day, but they wouldn't acquaint me annihilation because I wasn't family. I hoped he was okay. I anticipation about him for years. Wondered if he fabricated it. He added then fabricated it," Evelyn said, animated through her own tears. She angry and gestured to a man continuing at the end of the row. "Marcus, appear here, baby." A man in his aboriginal 50s stood and confused against them. Healthy, strong, actual abundant alive. He had tears animate bottomward his face, too. "Mr. Fallon," Marcus said, his articulation blubbery with emotion. "I'm the kid you saved. Jimmy looked at him, afresh at Evelyn, afresh aback at Marcus, and he laughed. That 18-karat afraid Jimmy Fallon beam that America knows so well. Except this time it was alloyed with sobs. You're okay, Jimmy said, advertence the obvious, overwhelmed. I'm an ancestor of 3, Marcus said. I'm an aerial academy teacher. I drill master basketball. I've had an admirable activity, and none of it happens if you erring to your car a altered way that night. The admirers was continuing now applauding, crying, watching article absolute unfold. Denzel Washington was still on stage, wiping his own eyes. Questlove had accustomed up any pretense of able composure. The roots were above-board emotional. Jimmy accepted Marcus, captivated him tight. 2 strangers affiliated by one accidental act of affection 31 years ago. Aback they assuredly separated. Evelyn accomplished into her purse and pulled out article else. A babyish anthology beat abounding with handwriting. I wrote you a letter every year, she said, handing it to Jimmy. On the ceremony of that night, every year for 31 years. I never had anywhere to accelerate them, but I wrote them anyway. Thanking you, cogent you about Marcus's life, about his graduation, his wedding, his children. I capital you to apperceive what your affection created. Jimmy took the notebook, was afraid hands, accessible to an accidental page. Apprehend a few curve of Evelyn's accurate autography anecdotic Marcus's aboriginal day teaching at the aforementioned aerial academy he'd attended. You gave me my son back, Evelyn said quietly. And I've spent 31 years aggravating to acquisition a way to say acknowledge you. So aback I saw you on TV, aback I accomplished who you were, I knew I had to acquisition you. I had to accomplish abiding you knew that what you did mattered, that you afflicted everything. Jimmy couldn't speak, aloof nodded, clutching the anthology to his chest. Denzel absolved boring bottomward the alley against them. Aback he accomplished the group, he put a duke on Jimmy's shoulder. She emailed my aggregation 3 weeks ago. Denzel said told me the accomplished story, asked if I could advise her get to you. And I anticipation if any time there was an adventure that adapted to be told in public, it's this one. Because bodies charged to apperceive that affection echoes. That what you do aback nobody's watching matters. That you never apperceive whose activity you're changing. Jimmy looked at Denzel, afresh at Evelyn, afresh at Marcus. I was aloof a kid, he said. Said helplessly. I aloofed what anyone would do, but they didn't, Evelyn said firmly. Dozens of bodies absolved accomplished my babyish that night. You were the one who stopped. You were the one who stayed. And I charge you to understand. Every acceptable affair Marcus has done in his life, every apprentice he's taught, every kid he's coached, every moment of joy his accouchement except experienced. All of that exists because you cared abundant to stop. If this adventure confused you, subscribe and allotment it because belief like this deserved to be heard. The appearance didn't abide with its approved agenda that night. Jimmy brought Evelyn and Marcus up assimilate the stage. They sat in the bedfellow chairs, Evelyn on one side, Marcus on the other, Jimmy in between, and they aloof talked about that night in 1987, about the ambulance ride, about Marcus's recovery, about the years of wondering, about the moment Evelyn accustomed Jimmy on TV, about the email to Denzel about tonight. Denzel stood to the side, absolution them except the moment. The admirers never sat down. They aloof stood watching, witnessing article that transcended television. Aback the appearance assuredly went to commercial, Jimmy absolved backstage, still captivation Evelyn's notebook. He had it affected the abutting day. It hangs in his bathrobe allowance at 30 Rock. 3 months later, Jimmy abounding Marcus's daughter's academy graduation. He sat with the ancestors because that's what ancestors does. And every year on the ceremony of that night in 1987, Jimmy calls Evelyn. They allocution for an hour. She tells him about Marcus's life. He tells her she afflicted his life too. Reminded him why he does what he does, why actuality arresting matters, why assuming up is everything. The photograph Denzel handed him that night. Jimmy keeps it in his wallet now, appropriate abutting to account of his own kids because affection echoes. And sometimes it takes 31 years to apprehend the sound.